Chapter 4. Corky, what is it? Seeing the horrified expression on Corky's face as she stood frozen at the window, Kimmy and Deborah leapt off the couch and darted across the room. Ronnie, who had scrambled to her feet, was right behind them. He's here, Corky managed to cry. She pointed toward the middle of the yard. Kimmy put a protective arm around Corky's shoulders and drew her aside. The other two girls pressed their faces close to the glass and peered out. Huh? Where? He's here, Corky insisted, her voice trembling. He stared at me with those empty eyes, like ghost eyes. I don't see him, Deborah said, cupping her hands around her eyes to shut out the glare from the living room. I don't see anything, Ronnie agreed. The wind is blowing the leaves around, that's all. Hey, there are two cats down at the end of the drive, Deborah reported. She turned away from the window to face Corky. Is that what you saw? No, Corky insisted, shaking her head. I saw him. I did. He was there, walking on the grass toward the house. Well, he's gone now, Ronnie said, flashing Kimmy a puzzled look. Corky breathed a loud sigh of relief. He must have seen us all staring at him and run away, she said. Yeah, I guess, Deborah said thoughtfully. I guess, Ronnie repeated. They don't believe me, Corky thought miserably. They don't believe I saw him. They think I'm seeing things. And then she added, I'm not so sure I believe me. She shuddered and started back to the couch. Guess we'd better get going, Kimmy said, starting toward the front hallway. I promised my parents I'd be back half an hour ago. Me too, Ronnie said, forcing a smile for Corky. It was really nice of you to come, Corky said, a little embarrassed at how stiff the words sounded. I mean, I'm so glad you came by. With that guy and everything. Again, Ronnie met Kimmy's eyes. None of them believe me, Corky thought again, catching Ronnie's expression. They think I'm cracking up. She glanced at the front window, half expecting to see the hooded guy peering in at her. The window was dark and empty. Kimmy and Ronnie had pulled on their coats. Is that fake fur? It's really neat. Corky ran her hand up and down the sleeve of Ronnie's coat. You like it? There's room in here for you too, Ronnie joked. Hey, aren't you coming? Kimmy called to Deborah, who had hung back at the living room doorway. I thought I'd stay a few minutes and talk with Corky, Deborah told Kimmy. She turned to Corky. If that's okay? Yeah, sure, Corky replied quickly, smiling at Deborah. I'll walk home, Deborah told Kimmy. I can drive you, Corky said. Well, think about what we said, Kimmy told Corky, pulling open the front door. Come to practice, okay? I'll think about it. I really will, Corky replied. More goodnights. Then Kimmy and Ronnie disappeared out the door. Corky followed Deborah back into the living room. They both headed for the couch. The beams of Kimmy's headlights rolled up the wall, then disappeared. Deborah tucked her legs under her slight frame and settled onto the cushion. How are you, Corky? I've been meaning to come over for a long time. I'm okay, I guess, Corky said, sitting on the arm of the couch at the far end from Deborah. No, I mean, really? Deborah said, her blue eyes suddenly glowing with intensity, burning into Corky's. I mean, how are you really? Not great, Corky admitted. I mean, it's been hard. Real hard. You were there that night, Deborah. It must be hard for you, too. Deborah nodded solemnly. Kimmy and Ronnie think I've gone weird? Her hand went up to the crystal at her neck. They think I'm weird because I've become so interested in the occult, but I can't get over what happened? Corky uttered a dry laugh. We've all gone a bit weird, I think. Deborah didn't smile. They told me not to tell you this, but I have to. They made me swear I wouldn't say it, but I don't care. I have to let you know, Corky. Corky walked to the window, turned, and rested her back against the sill. Let me know what? Why are you being so mysterious, Deborah? The evil is still here, Deborah said flatly, her eyes suddenly dull as if someone had turned off a light inside her. Corky's mouth dropped open, but no words came out. Deborah shifted uncomfortably on the couch. The awful jangling music from the Nintendo game upstairs seemed to grow louder. You were there, Deborah, Corky said, her voice nearly a whisper. You saw me fight poor Jennifer. You saw the evil spirit pour out of her mouth. You saw the evil go down into Seraphir's coffin where it was buried again. You saw it all, Deborah. Deborah nodded, keeping her lifeless eyes locked on Corky's. I saw, but I know the evil didn't die, Corky. You didn't kill it. Believe me, it's still around. But, Deborah, maybe... Corky wasn't sure what to say. Kimmy and Ronnie were right. Deborah had gotten strange. She had always been a little quiet, a little cold even, but sitting there so straight on the couch, her legs tucked under her, dressed all in black, her pale face frozen in that stare, Deborah looked positively frightening. Kimmy and Ronnie don't believe me, Deborah said, clasping her hands in front of her almost as if preparing to pray. But I'm right, Corky. The evil spirit is still around. I can feel the evil. I can feel it so strongly, right now, right in this house. Please stop, Corky cried. She pushed herself away from the window and walked back to the couch, stopping a few inches in front of Deborah. These books you've been reading, about voodoo and the occult? I've been studying, Deborah replied, sounding defensive. I know what I'm talking about, Corky. She suddenly reached up and grabbed Corky's hand. We were never friends. I know I was never nice to you or to your sister, but we have to be friends now. We have to trust each other. Deborah's hand was burning hot. Corky pulled away. Deborah let her hand fall back in her lap. Corky sat down beside her on the couch. We have to forget what happened, Corky heard herself say. Deborah shook her head, frowning. We can't? Not while the evil is still here? Maybe you should stop reading all that stuff, Corky said softly. We've all been through a terrible experience. But we have to get on with our lives now. We have to force ourselves. I know that's why Kimmy and Ronnie asked me back on the squad. You're not listening to me, Deborah insisted. The evil spirit is alive. You didn't kill it, Corky. There's no way we can get on with our lives. Not while it's still here. You've got to believe me. Deborah, your hand is so hot. Do you have a temperature? Corky asked. A shrill whistle interrupted their conversation. Oh no, I forgot all about the hot chocolate. Corky hurried toward the kitchen. Let it whistle? I've been reading about ancient spirits, Deborah said. Sit still. We need something hot to drink, Corky interrupted. I'll be right back. She hurried out of the room, her mind spinning, Deborah's words echoing in her ears. Poor Deborah, Corky thought. She seems as troubled as I am. She looks so pale, so tense, so frail. What can I say to her, she asked herself, after turning off the tea kettle. What did she expect me to say? I don't believe the evil spirit is still alive. I saw it buried. I saw it. We all saw it. But what if it's true? What if it isn't buried? What then? Is Deborah trying to scare me? Corky suddenly wondered. Is she saying all this just to keep me from going back on the squad? No, Deborah believed in what she was saying. It was obvious from the expression on her face, from the dull horror in her eyes. Corky pulled 2 mugs down from the cabinet and glanced out the kitchen window. Was that a figure she saw in the backyard? Was someone out there? She looked again and saw nothing. It must be my imagination, Corky reasoned. She poured the chocolate powder into each mug, all the while peering nervously out the window into the dark yard. Hey, Corky, Deborah called from the living room. Be right there, Corky shouted back to her. I'm just going to pour the hot water. She lifted the kettle off the stove and carried it to the mugs on the counter. As she reached the counter, her arm suddenly flew straight up. Without wanting to, she raised the steaming kettle over her left hand. Hey! She cried out. She tried to lower her right arm, struggling to push the kettle back down, to lower it, to move it away from her left hand, but her arm wouldn't obey her. She had no control over it, and her left hand wouldn't move away from the countertop. What's happening? What's happening to me? Holding the kettle high, her right hand tilted the kettle down, down, down. Steam rose from the spout. Then the scalding water began to shower down on her left hand. Help! Ow! She couldn't lower her arm, couldn't move her hand out from under the boiling waterfall. Help me, please, she cried. The scalding water gushed over the back of her hand, splashing up her arm. I can't stop. Can't stop. The scalding water splashed onto her skin, burning, burning, burning beyond pain, beyond all sensation. Chapter 5. She's up in her room, Sean told Chip. Chip tossed a shady-side high-letter jacket onto the banister and pulled down the sleeves of his bulky sweater. Is it okay to go up? He asked. Sean blew a large pink bubble before replying. Yeah, Kimmy's up there too. Chip frowned. He glanced up to the top of the stairs. He didn't really want to see Kimmy. It had been 2 months since he'd broken up with her and gone out with Bobby Kokorin, but Kimmy still treated him coldly and made him feel uncomfortable every time they bumped into each other. When they passed in the halls at school, she always turned away, cutting him dead. Is Corky feeling okay? Chip asked Sean, delaying the confrontation. Sean nodded, unsticking bubblegum from his cheeks. Yeah, she's okay, only she can't wrestle. That's too bad, Chip replied, chuckling. He was trying to decide whether to go upstairs or not. Maybe I'll come back later, he told Sean. Chip, is that you? Corky's voice called from upstairs. Trapped, he thought. Hi, he shouted, and stepped past Sean to climb the stairs. He stopped in the doorway to Corky's bedroom. She was sitting on the edge of the bed, her bandaged hand resting in her lap. Kimmy was standing by the dresser, zipping up her down coat. "How are you doing?" Chip asked Corky, flashing her a broad smile. "A lot better," Corky said, smiling back. Chip crossed the room and bent down to give her a quick kiss on the cheek. After Bobby's death, he and Corky had become friends. Corky found that he was someone she could talk to, about her sister, about her feelings of grief, about her fears. After a while, they become more than friends. A tall, athletic-looking boy with an open, friendly face. Chip was wearing a heavy, wool-plaid sweater, all greens and blues, which made him look big and broad-shouldered. His thick brown hair was unbrushed as usual. "So the hand is better?" he asked Corky. "Don't mind me, I'm just leaving," Kimmy interrupted, her voice dripping with bitterness. "Oh, hi, Kimmy," Chip said, trying to sound casual. He didn't turn to her. He didn't want to see the disapproval on her face. "Thanks for coming," Corky told Kimmy, standing up. "And thanks for bringing my homework." "See you Monday," Kimmy said. With a toss of her black crimped hair, she strode quickly from the room. As soon as she was gone, Chip stepped forward and wrapped his arms around Corky's shoulders, drawing her into a hug. "Ow! Be careful! My hand!" she exclaimed. "Hey, what are you two doing?" a voice shouted from the bedroom doorway. They both looked around to see Sean, hands on hips, staring suspiciously at them. "We're not doing anything," Corky said defensively. Sean glared at her. "I thought you said you couldn't wrestle. You were wrestling with him." He pointed accusingly at Chip. "We weren't wrestling," Corky said, laughing. "Now get lost." "Make me," Sean's standard reply. "Go on, beat it," Corky insisted. Sean put his tongue between his lips and made a rude sound. Another of his standard replies. Chip laughed. Corky elbowed Chip in the ribs. "Don't encourage him," she chided. She glared at her brother. "Go on, get lost." "Okay," he said, pouting. "I'm going." Sean started out of the room, but turned at the doorway. "But no wrestling, you hear?" He disappeared, and Corky heard him clomping back down the stairs. "He's funny," Chip said, still chuckling. "Who needs funny?" Corky asked dryly. She dropped back onto the edge of the bed. Chip sat down beside her. "So the hand, it's really better?" "Yeah, it's still pretty tender. You have no idea how hard it is to dress yourself with one hand." She laughed, a forced laugh. "I'm going back to school on Monday," she told him. "It's been a long week. A long week." He started to say something, but the phone on the night table rang. Corky sprang up to answer it. "Oh, hi. Yeah. Can I call you back later?" she said, holding the receiver in her right hand. "Chip's just arrived." "Okay, bye." She hung up the phone and, catching a glimpse of herself in the dresser mirror, ran her uninjured hand through her blonde hair, smoothing it back. "Who was that?" Chip asked, lying back on the quilted bedspread, resting his head on his hands. "Deborah," she replied. "She calls me every afternoon now. Ever since I burned my hand and she ran next door to get my parents, I think she feels responsible for me or something." "Is she still insisting that the evil spirit made you burn yourself?" Chip asked, frowning. Corky crossed to the window and looked down on the backyard. The late afternoon sun had lowered itself behind the trees, making shadows stretch all across the leaf-covered lawn. "Don't make fun of Deborah," she said in a low voice. "Hey, I'm sorry," Chip replied quickly. "It's just that she's going weird or something. People accidentally burn themselves all the time, Corky. Your right hand slipped. The water poured onto your left hand, and—" "My hand didn't slip," Corky said shrilly. "It wasn't an accident, Chip." She decided she had to tell him what really happened. Chip pulled himself up to a sitting position. His face revealed his surprise. "You mean you believe her?" he asked, his voice rising several octaves. "I don't have to believe her," Corky replied sharply, staring at him now. "I was there. I know what happened. I could feel the evil, Chip. I could feel it paralyze me. The evil spirit was there. It forced me to scald myself. It held my hand there and forced me." Okay, sorry," Chip muttered. He didn't like to fight with her. He almost always backed down or changed the subject. "That scary guy hasn't shown up again?" he asked. "The one with the gray eyes?" "No sign of him," Corky replied. She shook her head bitterly. "Kimmy and Ronnie are sure that I made him up. Every time I started to point him out, he'd vanish. Poof!" She snapped her fingers. "Weird," Chip replied. He couldn't think of anything else to say. "So do you—" "I never told you. I talked to a psychiatrist," Corky interrupted, walking back to the bed and sitting down next to him. "Huh?" "At the hospital," she told him. "When I told the emergency room doctors how I burned my hand, they called for a psychiatrist to see me. I guess they thought I did it deliberately or something." She rolled her eyes. Then Corky's expression grew thoughtful. As she talked, she smoothed the bedspread with her unbandaged hand. He was a young guy, really nice. His name was Dr. Stern. He was the psychiatrist Myra Burns saw for a while. Chip reacted with surprise. Myra? What did she need him for? She's got to be the most normal person in Shadyside. She told me she started sleepwalking suddenly a couple of summers ago, Corky told him. This Dr. Stern helped her a lot. So what did he say to you? Chip asked. Did you tell him about the evil spirit? Corky turned her eyes to the window, avoiding Chip's stare. Well, actually, no. Huh? I just didn't want to get into it with him, she confessed. I mean, I wasn't ready. I didn't want him to think I was totally crazy. I told him about Bobby dying and everything. And what did he say? Chip demanded. He said I should try to return to a normal routine. He said I've been through a lot, but I have to stop dwelling on the past. I have to try to get my life back on track. She grabbed Chip's hand and squeezed it. He was very understanding. What's a normal routine? Chip asked. You mean like early to bed, early to rise or something? Don't be dumb. He means I should try to do things the way I did before. Before Bobby died and that evil spirit. Her voice trailed off. I mean, I'm thinking of going back on the cheerleading squad. Outstanding, Chip exclaimed with genuine enthusiasm. Well, I thought I'd give it a try, Corky said, still resting her hand on his. Kimmy and Ronnie have been insisting, so... Excellent, Chip said, squeezing her hand. Excellent. I'm going to rejoin for 2 reasons, Corky said, her voice a whisper, her expression thoughtful. I know I have to adjust to not having Bobby around anymore. Getting back on the squad will keep me busy. You know, give me something to think about. And what's the second reason? Chip asked. I have to find the evil spirit, she said, locking her eyes on his. The evil is back. It must be inhabiting someone else. Maybe someone I know. Huh? What makes you so sure? Chip demanded. Because it was right in my house the other night, Corky said in a whisper, staring down at the floor. I'm going to find it before it kills again. Chip stared at her thoughtfully, but didn't reply. She raised her eyes to his. I have one favor to ask. Sort of a big one, she said reluctantly. Yeah? Chip eyed her wearily. What is it? Come with me to the cemetery tonight after dinner? She asked in a tiny, pleading voice. Huh? He swept his hand back through his thick, disheveled hair. Come with me. I want to go to Bobby's grave. Just one more time. I promised myself I'd stop going there so often, but I just want to tell Bobby my decision about going back on a cheerleading squad. Chip sighed. Bad idea, he said softly. Corky squeezed his hand. Come on, Chip. It's a bad idea, Corky, he repeated heatedly. You said that shrink wants you to get back to a normal routine. Well, going to the cemetery all the time isn't normal. I don't think you should go. She leaned over and pressed her cheek against his. Come on, she pleaded softly. One last time. I promise. She kept her face pressed against his. He turned toward her. She kissed him tenderly, a long kiss, a pleading kiss. When she finally pulled her face away from his, she could see his features soften. Okay, I'll go with you after dinner. And then he added, I guess there's no harm. What could happen? It was a warm night for early December. Thousands of tiny white stars dotted the charcoal sky. A huge full moon cast bright light over the Fear Street Cemetery. Since the cemetery was little more than a block from Corky's house, she and Chip walked. He carried a flashlight in case the moonlight wasn't enough, swinging it as they walked. She asked him about last Saturday's basketball game, the first preseason one. He told her about the center on the opposing team who repeatedly slam-dunked, even though he was the smallest guy on the floor. She told Chip how Sean had slipped green food coloring into the mashed potatoes just before dinner. Neither of them talked about what they were doing, where they were headed. It was as if they were pretending they were out for a pleasant walk and not going to the Fear Street Cemetery so Corky could talk to the dead sister she couldn't get out of her thoughts. After leaving the sidewalk, they made their way through an old section of the cemetery, past rows of low, crumbling gravestones, jagged, shadowy forms in the gray moonlight. Chip's flashlight sent a cone of bright light over the tall grass ahead of them. Corky stopped and grabbed Chip's arm as 2 eyes appeared in the light. A scrawny white cat stepped timidly out from behind a granite gravestone. It mewed a warning, then scampered away, disappearing into the darkness. Corky held on to Chip's arm and led him up a hill toward a section of newer graves on a flat, grassy area, bounded by low trees. This way, we're almost there, she whispered. Chip suddenly held back. She stopped and followed the direction of his gaze. He was shining a light on a grave marker, its smooth whiteness revealing that it was new. Jennifer Daly's grave. Corky sighed and tugged the sleeve of Chip's sweater. Every time she passed that grave, terrifying memories flooded her mind. She didn't want that to happen now. She didn't want to think of poor Jennifer or the evil spirit that had inhabited her body. She wanted to tell Bobby her decision and then leave the cemetery, leave the horror behind, leave the memories behind, or at least try to. Hearing a sound on the street, she turned around, just a passing station wagon. When she looked back down toward the old section, her eye caught a tilted 100-year-old tombstone, lit up by the bright moon. Corky knew it well. Surrounded by 4 other graves, Sarah Fear's stone, worn by time and the weather, stood silent. It was over Sarah Fear's grave that Corky had battled the evil spirit on that dreadful, terrifying night. Over Sarah Fear's open grave, she had fought and won, and sent the evil pouring out of Jennifer Daly's body back into the grave forever. Or so she had thought. But the evil hadn't remained in the grave. The evil was back. Somewhere. Corky shuddered. I don't want to think about this now. I don't. This way, Corky said, turning away and striding with renewed purpose up to her sister's rectangular grave marker. Remnants of the flowers Corky had brought there a week ago lay shriveled at the foot of the stone. Suddenly chilled, Corky shoved her hands deep into the pockets of her windbreaker and turned back to Chip. He was leaning against a tree several yards away, his arms crossed over his chest, his eyes on the sky. I guess he's giving me a little space, Corky thought. She turns to face her sister's gravestone. It's me, Bobby, she said in a low voice. I'm really not going to be coming here for a while. At least I'm going to try not to come. I need to get my life back to normal. I knew you'd want me to. Corky paused, glanced at Chip, who was still staring at the heavens, took a deep breath, and continued. I just wanted to tell you about the decision I've made. I hope it's the right one. I've decided to go back on a cheerleading squad. You see, Bobby? Corky stopped. She heard a sound. She turned and peered down the hill. Her breath caught in her throat. She froze, and stared in horror as a woman floated out of Sarah Fear's grave. Chapter 6. As the woman materialized in the shadows, Corky struggled to find her voice. Finally, she managed to call out Chip's name. Uncrossing his arms, he turned to her, startled. Corky pointed. Would Chip see the woman too, or was she seeing things again? Corky was suddenly filled with dread. Was she losing her mind completely? Had she really seen this woman float up from Sarah Fear's grave? Hey, Chip shouted. He saw the woman too. Corky realized she'd been holding her breath. She let it out with a loud whoosh. Oh, hi, the woman called up to them. The beam from Chip's flashlight played across her face as he made his way down toward her. She was young and kind of plain, Corky saw. She had straight black hair that hung down over the turned-up collar of her trench coat. She raised her hands to shield her eyes from the light. You scared me, she called out. I didn't know anyone else was here. Chip lowered the light to the ground and stood waiting for Corky to catch up. Reluctantly, she followed. You scared us, Chip said, as he and Corky joined the young woman. I thought you were a ghost or something, Corky said, trying to make it sound light. The young woman didn't smile. I'm just doing a gravestone rubbing, she said. She had a scratchy voice, a voice that sounded older than she looked. Did you two come here to be alone? Without waiting for an answer, she knelt in front of Sarah Fear's gravestone, then lay down on her stomach to work. Oh! Corky couldn't help but utter a cry. The young woman was lying in the exact same place over the grave where Jennifer Daly had died. Stop, 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 Corky cried silently to herself. Stop thinking about it. But how could she not be reminded when this woman was lying in the exact place? What are you doing? She asked, speaking loudly to try to force away the horrible memories. I just told you. I'm doing some gravestone rubbings, the woman answered, rapidly moving a piece of black chalk over a thin sheet of paper she had taped over the tombstone. There are some wonderful stones in this graveyard. Some of them are truly unique. Many are very revealing of their time, I think. She finished quickly, then climbed to her feet, examining her work. Seemingly pleased, she rolled up the paper and smiled at Corky. I'm kind of glad not to be alone, she said pleasantly. This cemetery has an amazing reputation. I know, Corky said darkly. How can you work in the dark? Chip asked, pointing to the rolled-up paper in her hand. I do most of it by feel, and I have a flashlight, and, of course, the moon. Chip wanted to ask more, but didn't. I'm a graduate student doing research on Shadyside history. She stuck out her hand to Chip. I'm Sarah Beth Plummer. Chip and Corky shook hands with her and introduced themselves. She seems quite pleasant, Corky thought, once you get used to the old lady voice with her young face. Corky guessed that Sarah Beth was in her early 20s. Do you know anything about Sarah Fear? Corky asked, staring at the gravestone in front of them. The question seemed to surprise Sarah Beth. She narrowed her dark eyes and shook her head. Not very much. I've read a little about her, in old newspapers mostly. I know she came to a strange and mysterious end. Huh? Really? Corky asked with genuine interest, her voice rising several octaves. What happened to her? Sarah Beth pulled the collar of her trench coat tight. She shivered. It's getting really cool, don't you think? She asked, glancing toward the street. Then she added, Are you really interested in Sarah Fear? Yeah, Corky replied quickly. It's a long story, but I'm very interested. She cast Chip a look, urging him to respond. Me too, Chip said obediently, placing a hand protectively on Corky's shoulder. Well, there's a small coffee shop in Hawthorne, Sarah Beth said, buttoning the top button on the coat. It's within walking distance. It's called Alma's. It's sort of a college hangout. I know where it is, Chip said. It's just a couple of blocks from here. If you want, Sarah Beth continued, we could go there and get something hot to drink. I'll tell you all I know about Sarah Fear. Excellent, Chip said, glancing at Corky. Okay, Corky agreed. The image of Sarah Beth floating up from Sarah Graves' fear flashed into Corky's mind again. She hesitated. I imagined it, she told herself, just as I imagined Bobby rising up from the ground. Sarah Beth seems friendly and interesting. Taking one last glance up toward Bobby's headstone, she turned and followed Chip and Sarah Beth to the street. It took only a few minutes to walk to the restaurant at the corner of Hawthorne and Old Mill Road. See that place over there? Sarah Beth asked, pointing to a small red brick house across the street. That's where I'm living. It's not a mansion, but it's cozy. Alma's coffee shop was small but cozy too. A long counter ran along the right wall. Narrow red vinyl booths lined the other wall. The restaurant smelled of strong coffee and grilled onions. 4 teenagers at a booth near the front were laughing loudly, drumming on the tabletop and clattering their silverware. 2 white-haired men nursing mugs of coffee at the counter were the only other customers. Sarah Beth squeezed into the last booth at the back. Corky and Chip slid in across from her. Sarah Beth ordered tea, while Corky asked for hot chocolate. Chip ordered a Coke float with chocolate ice cream. I have a craving, he said, shrugging his broad shoulders in reply to the stares of the other 2. The conversation was awkward at first. Corky began to wonder why she had agreed to come with this complete stranger. Sarah Beth seemed friendly enough, but Corky had an uneasy feeling about her, a suspicion she couldn't put into words. Why do you have to do your gravestone rubbing at night? She asked Sarah Beth. Again, Sarah Beth's eyes narrowed as if the question displeased her. Oh, I'm just running late as usual, she said, stirring her tea. The assignment is due tomorrow morning, so of course I waited till the last possible minute. It seemed like a perfectly reasonable explanation, but to Corky's mind, it just didn't ring true. Oops, sorry. Chip dropped his ice cream spoon onto the seat. Moving to retrieve it, he accidentally bumped Corky's hand. She cried out in pain, startling Sarah Beth. It's my hand. I, burned it, Corky explained, holding up her bandaged hand. Sarah Beth continued to stare at her. For a frightening moment, Corky had the feeling that Sarah Beth knew how she had burned it. But of course that wasn't possible. Stop being so suspicious, Corky scolded herself. Please tell us about Sarah Fear, she urged Sarah Beth. I'm really interested. Sarah Beth took a long sip of tea, then set the mug down. She reached for the aluminum sugar dispenser. Okay, here's a little information I've been able to find, she said, pouring a stream of sugar into the tea. There isn't much information available about her. Strangely enough, I've been able to find out a lot more about her death than about her life. She married a grandson of Simon Fear, a mysterious man who lived in Shadyside and built an enormous mansion back in the woods, away from everyone else in... That's the burned-out old shell across from the cemetery, Chip interrupted, busily scooping ice cream out of the tall soda glass. There wasn't much of a cemetery when Simon built his house, Sarah Beth replied. He was all alone out here for a while. Then they built the mill in this area. Soon after that, the city built a road through the woods, right past the Fear Mansion, and it came to be named Fear Street. Wow, I never knew any of this, Corky said intrigued. Of course, my family is new in town. We just moved here this fall from Missouri. Have you lived in Shadyside a long time? Is that why you're so interested in the town? Sarah Beth took a sip of her tea, staring over the booths to the front window of the restaurant. I've lived here on and off, she replied curtly. Am I being too nosy? Corky wondered. Is that why she got so cold? As I said, Sarah Fear married Simon's grandson. She and her husband lived on a house near Simon's mansion. a large house on Fear Lake. That's the small lake with the island in the middle of it, Chip explained to Corky. It's back in the woods, 2 or 3 blocks from your house. As I mentioned earlier, little is known of Simon Fear's life, Sarah Beth continued, rolling the sugar dispenser between her long, slender hands. Her husband died suddenly of pneumonia just 2 years after they were married, leaving her quite wealthy, according to the newspaper reports from the time. She had servants. Her house was always filled with people. After her husband died, her 2 brothers moved in with her, as did several cousins. Despite her wealth, she was never mentioned on the social pages of the newspaper, nor was she ever mentioned as being involved with charitable functions, the way wealthy people often are. I haven't found much personal information about her, Sarah Beth continued. I don't know if she ever remarried. There isn't any mention of it in the Fear family records I've seen. Of course, she didn't live long enough to have much of a life. She died young, too? Corky asked in surprise. Very, Sarah Beth replied somberly, in her 20s. Sarah died in 1899. The whole thing was very mysterious. The Fear family pleasure boat capsized on Fear Lake for no apparent reason. It was a calm, sunny summer day. The lake was as flat as glass. There were no other boats on the water. Yet the boat turned over. All on board were drowned. Sarah Fear, her brother, her niece and nephew, and a servant. Whoa, Chip let out a breath, shaking his head. Corky stared at Sarah Beth, listening to her story in rapt silence. So that explains the 4 graves around Sarah Fear's grave, she thought. A brother, a niece, a nephew, and a servant. They all drowned, Sarah Beth said again, speaking softly, leaning over the table. All within view of the shore. Maybe a 5 or 10 minute swim at most. Sarah Beth sipped her tea, then licked her pale lips. No one knows why the boat turned over. No one knows why everyone drowned. It's all a mystery. Corky stared down at her mug of hot chocolate, thinking hard. Sarah Beth's scratchy voice still echoing in her ears. It was the evil spirit, Corky thought. It had to be the evil spirit that was responsible for that accident. She was tempted to tell Sarah Beth about the evil force, but it was late. Her hand ached and she suddenly felt tired. Besides, she realized she didn't really trust the young woman. She didn't know enough about her to confide in her. There's more, Sarah Beth said suddenly. Corky saw Sarah Beth staring at her as if trying to read her thoughts. After Sarah Fear's death, there were all kinds of stories. Stories about her. Stories about how she and the servant who drowned had been lovers. Stories about how Sarah and the servant were seen walking in Shadyside, walking in the woods behind her house, even walking in town, long after their death. You know, Sarah Beth scoffed, the usual ghost story mumbo-jumbo that the Fear family is known for. Her attitude surprised Corky. You don't believe it? Corky demanded. Sarah Beth chuckled. A smile formed slowly on her lips. I think it's all kind of funny, she replied, locking her dark eyes on Corky's as if trying to gauge her reaction. Funny, Corky thought. 5 people drowned. Their boat capsizes on a calm lake for no reason. Such a horrible, tragic story. And Sarah Beth thinks it's kind of funny. Corky took a final sip of her hot chocolate. It's pretty late. My mom is probably worried. I didn't tell her I'd be gone this long. She gave Chip a push to get him moving. Nice meeting you, Chip said to Sarah Beth. He slid out of the booth and reached for Corky's windbreaker, hanging on a hook on the back wall. I enjoyed talking with you, Sarah Beth said, her eyes on Corky. I don't usually meet such nice people in the cemetery. Are you leaving too? Corky asked, standing up and allowing Chip to help her put her coat on. I think I'll stay and have another cup of tea, she replied. I live so close. I haven't far to walk. They all said good night again, and Chip and Corky made their way down the narrow aisle, past the counter where the 2 white-haired men still sat hunched over their coffee mugs, and out the front door. She's nice, Chip said, glancing up at the moon, which is now pale white and high in the black sky. I guess, Corky replied without enthusiasm, but there's something odd about her, don't you think? Odd, Chip shook his head. Just her voice. Corky stared through the restaurant window and focused on the back booth. She could see Sarah Beth Plummer sitting alone against the back wall, her slender hands wrapped around a white mug of tea. To Corky's surprise, she had the strangest smile on her face. Not a pleasant smile, Corky realized, a cruel smile. Even from that distance, even through the hazy glass, Corky could see the gleam in Sarah Beth's dark eyes, the unmistakable gleam of evil.